the next thing then, before I think we get to string theory, ought to be how physics progressed after the Standard Model was adopted, and what I have in mind are grand unified theories.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't I wouldn't call it progress. That's the problem.
Okay.
Yeah. So grand unified theories are, yeah. So I think one thing that's remarkable to look at the history is some of these ideas about how to go beyond the Standard Model came up like months or a year or two after the Standard Model base. So I think grand unified theories are like 74, 75, and there the idea was, well, mathematically you can take U1, SU2, and SU3, and you can make them subgroups of a bigger group. Let's say, for instance, one called SU5, all kind of complex 5-dimensional transformations, and then you can write down a theory that has this bigger symmetry, and you can say, well, the reason that we see these is because instead of having these 3 different things to explain, there's really only kind of one thing, and so we have an improved explanation. The problem with all of these grand unified theory schemes, though, has always been that they, while you kind of reduce the number of basic objects to 1, you don't actually have an explanation of what breaks the symmetry back down to U1 cross SU2 cross SU3. So if you try and do the standard grand unified theory thing, you say, well, instead of 3 forces, there's 1 force, it's an SU5 force, and there's only 1 parameter governing it, but we have to introduce a new and different kind of Higgs field, and we have to tune all of its parameters so it does exactly the right thing to break the SU5 down to what we see. So you've just traded, you think that maybe you've improved matters by getting rid of 3 things and making them 1 thing, but it's 1 thing together with a complicated package explaining how you're going to get back to the 3 things you knew about before. And that's in some sense always been the problem with grand unified theories. And so conceptually they weren't completely convincing because of that. And then the reason people got most excited about them is that they carried certain kind of experimental implications, that you should have quarks should decay then. You should be able to go from quarks to leptons, and protons should decay. And then people went out and started doing very precise measurements of the proton lifetime and find out that protons don't decay. So I think even the people who most were, started those theories, got most excited about them at the beginning, people like Georgi and Glashow, I think they later in life kind of gave up on them, saying, once they saw that the experimental results were in, and what the experimental vindicate, they were hoping that it would vindicate them, they'd get a Nobel Prize, but they kind of accepted the matter that, okay, experiment says this is not the way it goes, and they moved on to other things.
Yeah, well, that last point is actually what I thought was pretty crucial, because even though you didn't want to qualify the work on GUTs as progress, they at least followed the standard scientific method, and they were falsified by experiment, and they were left at that.
Yeah. So in some sense, that's true. I mean, I think the more disturbing thing about them is, I think a lot of the story that people tell the public about that is people say, well, we have here's a standard model, and we have these great ideas about these grand unified theories, and aren't they wonderful? And you kind of don't tell people that there's far too much of not telling the people that, oh, by the way, this idea doesn't actually seem to work. I mean, it actually doesn't really explain as much as it seems to, and the experiments say it's wrong. So there's a lot of kind of still I think you'll have, like, people in graduate courses will teach students about, here's how grand unified theories work, and why are we teaching our graduate students about grand unified theories? They don't. It's an idea that doesn't work. So there's this kind of there's a milder problem of the problem, which is kind of becoming very serious in the whole field of kind of refusal to kind of distinguish between ideas that don't, once it's clear that ideas that don't work, admitting that. And that's become, to me, a really huge problem for this subject. And the grand unified theories are kind of an edge case of that.
Mm-hmm.